Welcome to Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com. Now we got our 2017 Pacifica in the shop, got the wheels off, ready to do a brake inspection. I know it sounds a little funny doing a brake inspection, but this thing's got 25,000 miles and it's used in severe duty. I'm talking about stop and go traffic a lot, especially with 25,000 miles on it. Now when we're dealing with brakes on this Pacifica, new rules apply. Well, what do I mean by that? A lot of vehicles today have an electronic parking brake. Well, you push the button, it electronically actuates and holds the brakes. That's exactly what it does, just like the old pedal used to use, but it does it electronically. So, you know, we can handle the fronts, no problem, but when we get to the rears, we have a little bit of a problem. And the problem is we have to do some service work prior to actually doing any of this disassembly. And the first thing to do is identify what system you have. Now, you can have two types of system. GM likes to use these ones right here. This is a whole module, and what this does, it actually connects to a cable, and the cable goes around, and it pulls the e-brake just like you used to do with your foot, but it's doing electronically via this computer right here. Now, on our Pacifica, whole other ball game. We're talking about an electric motor right here attached to the caliper. Number one, supplied electrically, but number two, I can't go servicing this until I put it in service mode. And if you push in on this piston, you're wiping it out right off the bat. So we're gonna have to put our Pacifica in service mode before we do anything to the back. And while I do that, you know, Brian's doing a brake inspection right now in the rear of the vehicle. I'll get ready to put it in service mode. Let's check in with him and see how the inspection's coming along.
Well, we've done a visual inspection at the other three corners of the vehicle. We've checked rotor thickness. We've looked at the pad condition. They're all pretty good. Now, the owner of this vehicle told us that the groaning sound was coming, what he believed, from the back of the vehicle. So as I look at this and I check for rotor thickness here to see if it's in spec as well, and it is, just like the other corners, I don't think the rotors are the issue. I think we've got some kind of a glazing on these pads. Severe duty driving, that can absolutely happen. But John talked about the electronic e-brake and service mode. Here's why that matters. If at this point we followed a regular brake replacement procedure, we'd be taking these caliper mounting bolts out back here, we'd hang our caliper up with a bungee cord, and we'd do the service. The reason that's a problem, because this vehicle has an electronic emergency brake system, the computer's constantly wanting that caliper piston to be in the home position. And so randomly, with that hanging up there, it could actuate that caliper piston. If my finger's in the way, that's going to be a problem. At the very least, it's going to break something in that caliper. So we've got to get it in service mode. The other thing that could happen, John mentioned this, we take the caliper off, and if we're not in service mode, I go to compress that caliper piston, I'm absolutely going to do damage to this caliper. So we've got to get it in service mode before we proceed at all. We said new rules apply, and they do. So John's up in the cab. You can do this in your driveway, especially on a Chrysler vehicle. It's a Uconnect system. Very easy to put it in the service mode. Hey, John, you all ready?
Well, when you're putting it into service mode, you may have to do several different options. You can use a scan tool on some vehicles. That's the only way to do it. Some you may have to go through a procedure with the e-brake or the lever. You know, just look in the service manual, give you a good heads up on how to do it. This one's super simple because it's a Pacifica and it goes through the Uconnect. And you can look at this graphic right here, and it tells you to go through the EVIC, the Electronic Vehicle Instrument Cluster, and that's the Uconnect system. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty easy to do. I'll show you how to do it. Now, you can do this so you can get out there and just service the rear brakes. It doesn't make any difference if it's electronic or not once it's in service mode. So I'm going to go ahead. It tells you, first of all, to push the ignition button. Well, that's the first position. I want to go ahead and I want to do it one more time so I can get the car up to where it's actually in the run position but not starting. Once it's in the run position, our Uconnect's loading and everything's getting into the system. That's what we're going to go through to actually retract that caliper back and get it out of the way. I'm going to accept that, and then it's really pretty simple. Once I go in there, I can go into settings, and when I go into settings, you can see down there, you see brakes. You can scroll down if you want to, but I can just click brakes. It's just that easy. Now I got auto parking brake, I can check that, or service mode. Remember, we're going into service mode. Watch this, this is really cool. I'm going to press service mode, and when I do it, listen, you should be able to hear that caliper actually retract. It takes a couple seconds and it's walking it back. I'll show you after brake what it's actually doing. It's really cool. We got a cutaway to show you, but let me push that. It says here, do you want to retract it for service? Yeah, we want Brian down there to service. So simply just put yes and listen. Now you heard that? It actually ran them back. It says parking brake retracted. To reset, put it back, push the switch on. We'll do that when we're done. Well, we got it retracted, but it's always safe to disconnect the negative battery cable. Well, Brian's down there ready to do the brake job. We want to catch up with him, but we're going to take a short break, so stick around. There's more Tech Garage presented by RockAuto.com.
Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com, is being brought to you by Steel Rubber Products, quality crafted rubber parts and weather stripping. Evapo-Rust, super safe rust remover. And by RockAuto.com, all the parts your car will ever need.
Well, welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com. You know, this is interesting. I've got the lower caliper mounting bolt loose, it's free, and now I'm removing this upper one. We'll have to remove this spring clip, and then we'll get this disassembled. But one of the reasons this is interesting to me is I think about brake jobs in years gone by, and it's a pretty passive system. There's not much that's going to jump out and bite you, but it's a whole new day. John said it, it's new rules that apply. So we're going to follow the right procedure because these types of systems are only going to get more complex over time. So let me get this spring out. Here we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull this caliper off and support it up top just like we have. Now there's really nowhere for a bungee cord in here, so I'm just going to be gentle coming off. There we go. There's one pad out. Now there's a lot to kink here. You got a wiring harness and the brake line. Don't kink either one of them. We're going to set this down right here and hang it. Now let's take a look at this pad. Well, it's tough to really see glazing, but I can sort of feel glazing. And the thickness is okay, but I think this is where the groaning's coming from. So I'm going to get both side pads switched out here on the rear of the vehicle while John shows you exactly what happens when this electronic motor rescinds that piston.
Well, it wouldn't be Tech Garage if it wasn't about the hows and the whys. How's it work and why does it work? We're going to talk about the electronic brake caliper here in a minute, but you know, they went and changed all the rules. New rules apply. You can think back here to the actual caliper that had the e-brake built into it right here. We did this a few seasons ago. How do we know that? Well, first of all, if you look, you actually have the little teeth right here. Well, if you look at our new one right here, it doesn't have the teeth. So that tells me right there I can't use the tool to retract it. Now old school, we just got this little tool in here. We've done this before. We put it there, we wound it back. So once we get it back, we can go ahead and replace the pads. Still important because you have a gear drive mechanism system here. Now the new systems here, this is pretty cool because this is the electronic brake. Now you may run into a scenario where you just have to replace the motor or just the caliper. Maybe the motor's working fine. Couple tips for you. You can actually separate this unit right here. And this is pretty cool. I have the bolt off on the other side. And once I separate it, you can see two things I want to show you. First of all is this O-ring seal. Make sure this O-ring seal's on the new motor or is replaced because you don't want any dirt getting into this motor. It's a motor, it's a mechanism. It's going to cause problems. Also, the teeth right here, you see these teeth? Sometimes you have different gear teeth for different motors. Make sure they mesh when you put it back together. Also, when you're putting it back together, make sure it clicks in there. You can get it into the teeth drive and then you can go ahead and index it back to the bolt, put your bolt in and hit the torque specifications. But if you don't do that, you're going to snap these ears off every time. It's a massively expensive motor. You want to make sure you take good care of it and be gentle with it. Once again, doing the brake job, same rules. Make sure you lube the slides. Brian's going to push the caliper back the whole 9 yards. But here at Tech Garage, we're all about the hows and whys, so this is the coolest thing ever. Check this out. We actually took a caliper, we took it apart and we cut it away. Now this is something you would never want to do, especially with the computer system. I'm going to hook this up to our Optima battery and I'm going to show you it winding back and winding in. Well, what is that all about? Well, you remember I had to retract that. Well, with the computer retracted it, if you watch down in here, what's happening, this little black piston stop is going to move all the way back as I do that. So I'm going to hook it up to the Optima battery, and when I do that, watch that piston stop wind back. There it goes. So it's winding back, it's winding back, it's winding back. Now I know what you're saying. The piston didn't move. No, it didn't. That's what we were saying. Although it didn't move, we need to move it. So what's going to happen here is now it's okay to go ahead and take the tool and retract the piston. So I can put the tool in here and I can retract the piston right now. You see how easy it's going back? Now, if I didn't retract it, those screw threads, the motor, the winding, the seal, everything is going to be messed up, and we're talking about a massively expensive repair. Now once it's retracted back, Brian can go ahead and do a normal brake job just like he normally would. He'll get his tool, he'll retract the piston, he'll lube his slides, put his caliper piston back on, the pads, do everything like you normally would. But the key is, once it's all done, I'm gonna have to go inside the car and I'm gonna have to put it in operational mode. Well, what's going on then? Well, remember, it's retracted all the way. Old school, we used to just pump the pedal, get the brake pads out there. Well, no more. I wanna go ahead and engage that parking brake and get it to work, make sure everything's back in order. Now watch this, this is just as cool, because this time it's in, I'm gonna reverse the leads and I'm gonna put the motor, it's a bi-directional motor, and go in the other direction. And watch the piston. So what's happening now? It's actually running that piston out. That's gonna happen for two reasons. When I put it back in operational mode, we're gonna get the pads out so we don't have any clearance, so just a little bit of clearance between the pads and the rotor, so when you go to stop, you'll have full contact, and or if you ever push that e-brake switch, that's how it operates. It pushes it out, it pushes it back in. Now only Tech Garage do you get to see the inside of the pistons, but you know what? We're not gonna go very far with our Pacifica until we check in with Brian and make sure he gets those brakes in tip-top shape.
Okay, there's our final torque spec on the top caliper mounting bolt. We've already done the lower one, so we've got that all buttoned back up. Now, here's what I want you to see. We talked about retracting that piston to do this job right in service mode. Look how much play we've got in the caliper with the new pads in there. That's good evidence that piston is fully retracted back in there. So with this torque back to spec, we just have to add the spring clip back right here. This is a little tricky. Eat your Wheaties in the morning, you got this. There we go. It's seated. Now, I like to use a lug nut right here to keep that rotor true up to the face of the hub assembly, right? So now we've got rotor's not moving, got a good mounting on the caliper. Everything is connected, reconnected. So the next step is reconnect the negative battery cable and get John to put this thing back in operation mode so we can take this thing out for a test drive. We've done both sides. Nothing crazy on your test drive here. Nothing crazy to burnish the pads. Standard driving, don't do heavy braking and get the brake fluid boiling or anything like that. Just a regular test drive, and let's get these new pads seated and see if we've conquered this groaning problem.
Well, Brian's got them in tip-top shape. You know, we're ready to take the Pacifica on a family vacation, but the first thing we have to do before we roll is we got to go ahead and put it back into operation. And it's real simple. It says push the brake and hit the e-brake. Listen, this time it's actually winding the pistons back out so they're in contact. Brian mentioned that home position. Well, here they go. Here's the e-brake switch. And it says parking brake reset, brake service, exit complete. So we're ready to go. We X out, crank it up, we're on the road. You know, it's time to bring in the Project M&M, the Mercury Makeover. Stick around, we got some more cool stuff. More to come with Tech Garage, presented by rockauto.com. Well, welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by rockauto.com. Well, we got Project M&M, the Mercury Makeover, in the shop, and it's time to dive into the engine. I got Tom with me from rockauto.com. Tom, you're a car guy. You're part owner of rockauto.com, man. You don't mind getting your hands dirty?
Nope, no, we started rockauto.com because I like to get my hands dirty. I enjoy working on cars, and they've never been clean since.
Well, what do you got going over there?
Well, we got 2 coils and 2 coil plugs and 2 spark plugs replaced, and I got 2 more to go.
Well, you get to work, and I'll bring them up to speed. How did we get to the coils? And that's pretty cool. You remember in episode 1, we had that P0300 misfire code. Well, it was misfiring. It wasn't running good, so we had to check spark. Simply just come over and started unplugging the coils here one at a time, called a power balance test. What that did, it took away the spark. If the engine missed worse, that means that the cylinder was contributing. If it didn't shake at all, it wasn't contributing to begin with. So we went ahead and found number 1 wasn't contributing. We got time to replace the coils, and we're going to go ahead and replace them all. And I'll show you why we're replacing them all. What's a coil? What's a coil actually do? Well, this is pretty neat. I got a little ground out one here, and you can see it. What's going on is you have a primary side and you have a secondary side. So you're taking your voltage in when a points or a computer opens up and induces a voltage to the secondary side, and it makes makes a ginormous spark. That's what's happening. And a coil is only as strong as its weakest link. So we chose to go ahead and replace them all because of that weak link. We're going to replace every one of these coils on the car, and we're not going to have any issues. We're also going to replace the spark plugs, and that's important. I went ahead and printed up our spark plug gap right here. You can see the spark plug gap is 52 thousandths, and we also got our torque specifications here. Our torque specifications is 11 foot-pounds for the actual spark plug itself, and the coil bolt is 89 inch-pounds. That's important. Tom, how do you gap a spark plug?
Well, these days they usually come from the factory properly gapped, but it's always good to check. Maybe the spark plug is used in several different engines. So I just carefully try to avoid damaging the platinum tip. This particular spark plug gap gauge, I slide it down until it hits, and that's supposed to be 0.052 or something like that, and that's where it's at.
That's perfect. Now also on a coil, I got the one out that wasn't firing. You can see the coil right here. I sent my meter up to ohms of resistance. Now you can do this at home. You can check a coil. What I'm going to do is go across the primary side and the secondary side. I go across the two top terminals here, and you can see on the top terminal, I'm getting OL. So there's actually no continuity going through it. I'll take this new coil and I'll show you. If I go across the top here from one terminal to the other, I have about 0.7 ohms of resistance, and then I can go to the secondary down here to where it's actually firing and about 5,000 ohms of resistance. So this coil is going to be in much, much better shape. Also the boots. When you're dealing with the boots on these coils, these boots come apart too, don't they, Tom? Do you guys got a solution for that?
Yes, it's similar to the spark plug wires of old. This is a rubber material boot with a metal conductor inside, and these can often fail before the coil does. So when you replace the spark plugs, it's a good idea to replace these, and they come as a set now. So you may not have to replace your coil every single time you replace your spark plugs.
Well, Tom, what do you say we head over to the computer, we'll look at the boots, the packages, and some of the coils that we actually put on our Project M&M. Well, our P300 just turned out to be a misfire on cylinder number 1. But Tom, I mean, we replaced all the coils. Chain's only as strong as its weakest link. I mean, we have options there as well.
Yeah, we do. There's the ignition coil, and it always comes with a new boot, or you can just replace the boot sometimes. They're kind of the equivalent of the old spark plug wires that came on older cars. You have an insulator that could crack, you have a conductor inside that could break. So it's a good idea when you replace the spark plugs to just replace those ignition coil boots at the same time. And I'll show you that they come as sets now, similar to spark plug wires. So I'll pull up our Grand Marquis.
You know, while you're doing that, I mean, what if I'm just going to do like an intake manifold? Sometimes, or valve cover gaskets, I have to pull those off, and there's no problem with the coil whatsoever, but the boot's going to tear, the boot's going to rip, the insulator's going to fall off. I don't want to spend $80 on a coil.
Yeah, these are much less expensive, comparable to the cost of an old spark plug wire set. So you have the boots, and then you have the new conductor inside, and you get all 8 for this V8.
Yeah, that's crazy. Number one, the price is crazy, and number two, I mean, there's the picture right there. So if I pull it out, maybe I don't even know all that stuff's available. Now I know to even pull that off of my coil, I know that I can go ahead and replace that along with the insulator wire. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's the way to go.
Now I'll tell you what, we got a video question of the week coming up, and you don't want to miss it. So stick around. There's plenty more Tech Garage when we return right after this break.
Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com, is being brought to you by Custom Auto Sound, the originator of classic car OEM fit radios since 1977. Clamp Tight, the clamp making tool. And by RockAuto.com, all the parts your car will ever need.
Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com. One of my favorite segments, video of the question of the week. Check it out.
Hey guys, it's hard for me to stop. I have to push the brake pedal very hard. I had a brake job done not too long ago. Hey John and Brian, any idea on what I should have checked out?
Well, Yusuf, sounds like you got a hard brake pedal and it's hard to stop the car. First thing I would check, Brian, is definitely the booster. And there's a simple check you can do, and it's vacuum. You have to have vacuum if you have a vacuum actuated booster. I could demonstrate it real quick for you here on this board. Check it out. You're going to have vacuum coming from an engine source to your booster somewhere, Yusuf. So what I'm going to do is simply just get you to pull that hose off, put it in there, and you watch our gauge starts dropping down. And you see that gauge down there? Exactly, good vacuum. Anywhere from 15 to 24, 25 inches of mercury of vacuum, at least you know you're getting vacuum to it. That would be step number one. Brian, there's also different types of boosters and different tests you can run.
There really are. There's a vacuum boost and there's a hydro boost. Let's think about the hydro boost for just a second. Those are belt driven, right? And so if you got a belt that looks like this, that's a pretty easy fix and a pretty cheap fix in the grand scheme of things. It's slipping somewhere in its travel. If it's coming off the power steering pump, that's probably not performing well either. So lots of clues there. If it's a hydro boost that's belt driven, easy fix.
Yeah, the key there is power steering fluid. So anything going wrong with the power steering system, if you have a hydro boost, diesels like to use those because they don't produce vacuum. High-end cars use them just because of the fact that we're not robbing any engine vacuum. That's a problem. Check your power steering system if you have a hydro boost. Now vacuum, we just discussed, pretty cool. I got one cutaway here that you can actually see inside of here. And how this thing works is you have a diaphragm inside of here. And this is pretty neat because you got two types of boosters. Atmospheric suspended booster or a vacuum suspended booster. So let's just say we had vacuum on both sides. And then what happens, Yusuf, when you push the pedal in, atmospheric pressure is allowed to enter in this side. And when it does that, I got 14 pounds of pressure right here and a vacuum zero over here. It's going to help you push that pedal. Now, really and truly, it's super hard to push one of these if they're not working because the master cylinder is designed to actually run off a hydro boost system or a vacuum booster system. If you have manual brakes, a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's all about mechanical advantage in that braking system. That really could be the candidate for the problem that you're facing. So a couple diagnostics you can do in the driveway and figure this out.
Absolutely. What about our e-brake?
Wow, totally new rules. For all the brake jobs you've ever done, keep everything you've learned in mind, but understand the new rules. If you've got an electronic e-brake, you got to follow the procedures step by step.
Yeah, and exactly what you said. Just follow the procedures like you used to do. Really, don't be intimidated by it. Right. You know, putting it in that service mode, that was really easy, you know, and it may not be, you may have to go get a scan tool or do whatnot, but you can still handle it. You can go out into the driveway, you can do it. Brake pads, rotors, they're still cheap, same stuff. Put them on there, be done, get them brakes back in order.
Yep. Hey, love your questions. Keep them coming. Come see us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We love to hear from you.
Yep, well, we're out of time today, so join us next week at Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com, where there's never any fluff.
Production assistance for Tech Garage is provided by Chipola College, located in Marianna, Florida. Founded in 1947, Chipola College has a current enrollment of over 2,000 students. Chipola was recently ranked as one of the top 3 community colleges in the United States.